that we're going to ask, or and you would like for us to ask a question in English, please, Maltese, sorry, please leave a comment in the comment section and we'll get back to it during our Q&A, okay? So let us start. As my colleague said, we are Servizzi Ewropej f'Malta. I explained more our role in the last session. Basically, we are your gateway to EU services. We provide information about the EU and also about EU funding and support for EU funding as well. One of our tasks now is promoting EU careers locally and hoping to help prospective candidates such as yourselves to get a new job, hopefully, in the future. So a new career for you, just as a slight overview of the last session. In the last session, we gave you a very, very broad overview. We introduced the idea of it's not only with the EU institutions, that is the European Parliament and the Commission and the Council, but you have a wide variety. You have agencies which are in every member state, so to say, and you also have the European bodies as well that you can work in. We also explained that there's a lot of different profiles. It's not just lawyers or translators that we're looking for, but it is very broad. Can be assistants, clerks, can be policymakers, etc. There is even scientific experts. They're looking for everyone. And we also explained the positions. There is the permanent positions, the traineeship positions, and also the other temporary positions. For this session particularly, we're going into temporary positions. This will be temporary staff and contract agents. Now, this might look as if they're the same thing. However, they're very similar, but also a bit different at the same time. So why would we recommend that you consider these positions as an option rather than we're not saying that we do not recommend for you to go for a permanent position. However, this can be your first step into entering into the EU institutions and agencies. And why do we say this? Mainly because permanent officials, the calls are not very constant and they come out sporadically. And sometimes they take a very long process. However, when it comes to temporary contracts and contract agents, there is calls which are issued on a constant basis by the agencies and the institutions. So it's also ongoing. And there's also the fact that the recruitment process, it is much simpler than the permanent official is the recruitment process, and we'll go into each one. And another positive aspect of it is that in terms of salaries, in terms of benefits, such as allowances when you leave Malta, allowances if you're living there and you have a long travel distance to work, etc., you are still benefiting from that. There are also European language schools that if you have a family or children will benefit from, etc. So really and truly, the benefits will stay the same, the job will be the same, but the recruitment procedure will be much shorter. And of course, since it's a temporary position, you'll be tied to a contract. However, we'll explain how this can change for you maybe. Just right off the bat, I think this is very important for everyone to keep in mind for those present. If you are Maltese or a European national, it's perfectly fine, and everyone who is Maltese or an EU national is eligible to apply for these positions. However, if there are present someone who is not an EU national, Maltese national, and does not have the EU citizen full rights, then they would not be eligible to apply for these positions. Of course, there are any military services that if in your country, let's say you're living in Malta, but you might have military service duties in your country, you need to make sure that these have been covered. Another important aspect is that as an eligibility at the very beginning, you will need to have at least very good knowledge of one EU official language, official EU language, that is Maltese or English, they're both EU languages. And then you need to have a satisfactory knowledge of a second language, EU language. Now, this is advantageous to us as Maltese because most of us, our mother tongue is Maltese, so you already strike one off. And then we have English, which is at a very good level. So we strike off 2. And then all other languages that we know, be it Italian, German, French, Spanish, etc., that will come as an added benefit on your CV once you apply. Languages are key. Now it's important, and this is only the eligibility. Once you actually get to apply to a position, they will have their selection requirements, meaning that each position, they will have their own requirements. So you need to fulfill this eligibility criteria and then their own requirements. Okay, so let's move on. Let's start with temporary staff. So temporary staff, as we said last time, are usually employed to cover 3 main areas. They are either to cover highly specialized fields, for instance, scientific experts, or else high-level positions in agencies. For example, during last session, we had a head from a European agency joining us. He is a temporary agent. Then you also have temporary tasks. For instance, most agencies of the European Union are set up for a definite time. That means that they cannot give you an indefinite contract. They must give you a contract of a set amount, since their own agency might expire within the next 5 years. So they cannot give you a contract for indefinite. And then also, this is particular for the EU institutions, especially when you have staff shortages. This is particular when you have long leave. The EU offers the benefit that someone can take long leave for over 5 years. So you would be replacing that person. Then you have maternity leave and other leaves that people would be taking, permanent officials, these would be, and you would be replacing them. So when it comes to the contract type, the minimum is of 6 months. That would be a start, but the maximum is of 6 years. So you can start with a 6 or 12-month contract, and then you would move on. This would be renewed, and it might be renewed for 3 years. After 2 renewals, then you will have an indefinite contract. So in agencies, maybe you might be familiar with it, EASO, now it's the European Asylum Agency in Malta. That is an agency with an indefinite time span, so it will always be open. So we might start as a temporary staff in a position for 1 year, and then they will extend your contract to 2 years, and then eventually you can be on an indefinite contract and you'd be fine. And that is why we suggest going in with this. Now, so when it comes to temporary staff, since you're replacing or working in similar grades as permanent officials, these they have set positions. They are grades. So you can either enter with as a temporary agent as a secretary and clerk, that is normal office management and administrative support, or as an assistant, an AST. Assistant is not the usual perspective of us Maltese assistant. No, it's actually hands-on, and you're working on policy development, implementation, and more technical roles in administration, etc. So it is not just any assistant, it is quite specialized. And then you have the administrators, AD. They would be drafting policies, implementing EU law, analysis, or advisory work. So as you can see, it is quite a position in the EU. These positions for assistants and secretaries, you would need post-secondary education and experience. So anyone with a post-secondary education, let's say you've done your A-levels and diplomas, you are covered as long as you have experience to support it. For administrators, if you enter as a graduate level, you do not need experience. However, then as you go higher up, so to speak, then you will require more experience, especially in specialist backgrounds. Then, of course, the salaries, I did not include them here for the simple reason that these vary, since it's not the permanent officials, and they also vary depending on the country you are stationed in as well. So what is the selection procedure for temporary staff? So when it comes to temporary staff, the procedure per se is determined by the respective agency or institution. As you might recall, last time I mentioned EPSO, which my colleague mentioned EPSO. EPSO is the European Personnel Selection Office, and this office runs the recruitment test and the selection procedure for institutions This mainly, they do it for permanent officials and contract agents. Temporary staff fall out of this category. So this is to your benefit, because if they urgently need someone, the selection procedure will not be lengthy. It will only be probably a CV and an interview. Now, you need to be careful. Don't always take it for granted that it's a CV or an interview. In some cases, we know that the European Central Bank, for example, and the European Investment Bank, they have specific selection procedures which are a bit intense. So you need to do an online test, and then after that you can proceed. So it's quite intensive. What we do recommend is, since that the selection procedures might vary, is that when you find these positions, you need to first familiarize yourself with the position notice. Usually this is a document of 7 pages, and in it you would have a role description and contract length. So at the beginning, it would tell you that this contract is for 2 years and it is renewable with the possibility of indefinite, or it might tell you renewable but no possibility of indefinite. It will be determined over here. So you already know where you are heading at. Then you would have, apart from the eligibility criteria I mentioned earlier, you would also have the selection criteria. Then you would also have the selection procedure and the salaries. The salaries are always usually in the same remit, but they will be defined accordingly, especially when it's the case of the agencies. Now, I know that it might be confusing, but where to find these opportunities? So as a starting point, if you really don't know any of the agencies or anything else, our suggestion would be to start with the EPSO website. All you need to do is Google EPSO or EU Careers, and you'll be led to this page. Go press on job opportunities, and once you get on this page, as I show here, you can scroll down and you can find these temporary staff positions. Now, EPSO, since this falls out of its remit, does not publish every temporary staff position, but there are quite some. And actually here, there is one at the European Agency for Asylum, which is locally. So you can, it's a bit tricky because you can actually benefit from an EU wage and be locally stationed. So it's very good. Okay, so that is one. We also suggest that if you are familiar with the agencies you want to work with, let's say I would like to work with the European Maritime Agency, check their website because they issue them periodically themselves. Another option would be to use the EU CV online database. This database is managed by the Commission's DG for Human Resources, and periodically they have different positions open. You upload your CV and you can apply from this. Another area where you might find, and this is especially for the agencies, what I mentioned here, for the CV online database, this is particularly mostly for the European institutions. It is only for the European Commission, Council, and Parliament, only temporary positions for that. When it comes to the EU agencies network, this is the network which supports all the agencies around the EU, where you have more than 30, and they issue all their vacancies here as well. Not all of them, but the majority of them. So if you don't know where to start, this can be your starting point. Over here, I will switch my slide now. You can also see the different agencies. So if you scroll over here, you will see all the agencies that are available as well. So let's say you find one which is interesting and you want to go on it to check exactly what it is. Of course, over here, filter with temporary staff if you're interested in temporary staff, and you can find all the details there. Okay, so this is the first, so temporary staff now, that is overall what we have to say about it. If you have any questions, please put them in the chat box and then we'll get back to them later. Now, contract agents. So why are contract agents different from temporary staff? As we said, you have specific tasks related to temporary staff, and they are mainly also to replace the permanent officials. When it comes to contract agents are slightly on their own. Apart from providing additional capacity to the institutions, they are also related to temporary manual tasks and also administrative support tasks. Now, for this contract type, it is similar once again to the temporary staff, meaning that it starts with a minimum of 6 to 12 months with the possibility of renewal and the maximum of a 6-year contract with the possibility of an indefinite contract. As for the recruitment procedure, there are 2 types. One, you have the one which is run independently by the respective institutions and agencies, similar to what they do for the contract staff, meaning that they would have their own recruitment. As I told you, you would go on their website and you would find them respectively. Or else you can apply through EPSO, through the contract agency agent selection tool. I will go a bit more in detail later on exactly what this tool is. So contract agents, it's very important that whether you are applying with any institution or agency, they have these function groups. So make sure that when you are applying, that you know which function group it is, and apart from the contract type. So the function group will know that you can match your capabilities to it, because each function group is related to a different qualification. So function group 1 is manual and administrative support service tasks, for example, building management, etc., manual labor, really and truly. When it comes to function group 2, this is clerical or secretarial tasks, office management, and equivalent tasks. So it would be very similar to what I described of the temporary agents, assistants, or secretaries and clerks. No, sorry, this would be related to the secretaries and clerks, the equivalent of that. When it comes to function group 3, this would be equivalent of assistants, because you have executive tasks, drafting, accountancy, and other equivalent technical tasks. Then we move on to function group 4. This is administrative, advisory, linguistic, and equivalent technical tasks. This is very similar to the administrators that I mentioned for the temporary staff. So over here, I would like to also show you a bit the salaries. These are the absolute starting salary. So this is what they would offer you for each one. Now, as I said, the more experience you have and the more education and the more technical education and background you have, then you can get a higher salary. And also these salaries are not including allowances. So when you leave Malta, you get an expatriation allowance, you get a travel allowance. If you have children, you have children allowance as well. If you have people who are dependent on you, get an allowance for that. So it just keeps on increasing. So these are the start salaries overall. Now, the cost permanent. If you would like to apply from the EPSO side, when you apply for the EPSO side, this type of application has no deadline, meaning that the EPSO has it open all year round and you can submit your application whenever you would like. This is usually used by the institute. So you would send your application and EPSO would put you on a database. You need to renew this, if you need to renew your application every 6 months to show that you have interest. Now, when you submit your application, this does not mean that you will be immediately contacted to do the selection tests. No, far from it. The institutions and agencies then will go to EPSO and they will ask them if they can match the requirements that they have with the database that is now online, with the database of applicants they have. And then what happens is that EPSO gives them the database, they select the best candidates that they would like, and then they would, of course, but then after you pass the selection test, and I'll explain more what the selection tests are, then it is up to the institutions and agencies to recruit you. So you might pass the selection test, but you still might not be recruited by the institutions and agencies. So when it comes to cost permanent, there are different profiles. You have finance, you have project management, secretaries, clerks, law, policy officers, support workers, building management. There's a wide variety. So these are always open. So let's say you just graduated university, you don't know what to do, what's your next step? And you say, okay, I graduated in law. Let me put my application in and do my CV there and then. And then they might contact you to do a selection test. These, of course, each different profile is connected to those function groups I told you. For example, if we take law, since it's a bit more of a technical background, you would be with function group 3 or 4. But for secretaries and clerks, for example, you would need function group 2, which is the equivalent of the clerk side. So what is the recruitment for the CAS permanent? As I said, you submit an application with EPSO, then the institution, let's say the European Commission as a case in point, the European Commission contacts the EPSO and they tell them, can you provide me with a database of who you have that they select the best candidates, and then those are invited to the selection test. Then if you are successful in passing the selection test, you are placed on a reserve list. From this reserve list, the best candidates that match the recruitment necessities of the institution, of the commission, are selected. Then there is, for example, an interview or a group assessment of how you perform, and then you are given the offer of employment. So as you can see, if you want something more urgent, let's say you would like a position within the next couple of months, I wouldn't recommend going down this route of applying for through the CAS permanent procedure. I would actually encourage you to look up if the agencies you are interested in or the institutions and see what they have available now and then, because their procedure is less lengthy than this, and you would only have an interview, CV, and maybe some tests here and there. So if you want something, you're actively looking for something now, I wouldn't entirely recommend this procedure. But if you have the time and you would like maybe in the next year or so, maybe relocate or something, then yes, go for this, definitely. So what are the selection tests? Now, there are 2 selection tests that you must do. One is the reasoning skill test and the other is the competency-based test. The reasoning skills test is the computer-based testing. So this is known as CBT. Now, CBT is a bit infamous, so to speak, because it is done under in a time limit of 40 minutes, and you need to do verbal reasoning, numerical reasoning, and abstract reasoning. And these, you need a lot of training. You cannot just apply, receive the notification that you have a test tomorrow and you say, it doesn't matter. No, you have to actually, because practice makes perfect. There are platforms online, if you look them up, even EPSO provides them, and you need to train to get the best results, because you are under pressure. You have 10 questions for verbal reasoning, 5 questions for numerical reasoning, and then another 10 questions for abstract reasoning. And I can tell you, they are not so easy. So please, if you are actually interested, practice. So that was the computer-based testing. So now we move on to the competency-based test. These are multiple choice questions. This test evaluates your knowledge and competency in the field of a specific profile. It's not related to how much you know about the agency or the institution that is you are applying for. No, it's related to the tasks you will actually be doing later on. So, for instance, if you are interested in the finance profile, you will be asked about financial procedures, accounting, management, analysis, and advice. If you're a secretary or a clerk, you'll be asked for duties on organizing meetings, preparing for missions, filing documents, mail, etc. So you'll be asked very technical questions. And in total, you will have 25 multiple questions and you have 50 minutes to answer. So again, if there are tests online, which there are, please practice and train yourselves. This is a whole training process. So where to find these opportunities? Once again, you can find them on the EPSO website, and there are 2. EPSO website publishes 2. So first it publishes the individual ones done by the agency. So for example, there is the European Investment Fund. It is looking for a contract staff at senior agent lawyer, etc. So it is those ones that I told you that are run by the respective agency or institution. So those have the simple procedure, let's say just a CV and an interview or any other test that they might tell you. Then EPSO also publishes the permanent, the one that I was just explaining now. So as you can see, this application has no deadline and you can apply whenever you want. As I said, please make sure that you know which function group best fits your qualifications. So when you apply accordingly. So especially if there is a call, because let's say you are best suited for function group 3, but you apply for function group 4, you will be immediately disqualified once the institutions ask for EPSO to provide them a list of the best candidates. So be a bit careful, familiarize yourself best with the qualifications. Then there is the EU Agencies Network. We highly recommend that you familiarize yourself with it because they publish a lot of the calls. But again, my first, as I was saying for the temporary staff, look up the different agencies, what they are requesting, because they publish constantly, even so the EUAA, they publish constantly. So I strongly suggest that you do that. Okay, so let's say you've been selected for a temporary staff position or a contract position, and you are leaving Malta. We highly encourage you, as we said in the beginning of the session, during the last session, to seek out support from the European Employment Services Malta, EURES, who can support you as before you leave, and also filing of any particular documents, etc. So from my end, I am ready. I don't know if our colleague Charlene Caruana is here with us already. Are you here, Charlene?
Yes. Can you hear?
Okay, perfect. Okay, good morning, Charlene. So as we said when we promoted this event, we're going to also talk about career progression. So now I invite Miss Charlene Caruana. Miss Charlene Caruana is a technical attaché staffing with the permanent representation of Malta to EU in Brussels. And Charlene started her career as a public officer within the Ministry for Finance and Employment within the Maltese Public Service during her early years, where she served for 6.5 years. She applied for a position with the permanent representation of Malta to EU in Brussels in 2016 to serve during the first Malta presidency, and is still serving till the present day. Her role is primarily negotiations within the Council on Staffing Regulations, matters, and promoting Maltese within the EU institutions and agencies, and offering the necessary support and guidance. So Miss Caruana and ourselves at SEM collaborate a lot when it comes to EU careers, and she works on collaborates with various ministries, public entities, academia to ensure that the Maltese are provided with the necessary information. So Charlene, the floor is yours. Now, apologies, we started a bit late and I delayed, so it's all yours.
No problem, Faith. And thank you for inviting me. As you said, my primary role is to work on staff regulations and also anything in relation to e-careers. So that means issues in relation to staff regulations, whereby we cover permanent officials, temporary agents, and contract agents. But also there are other positions such as seconded national experts in professional training, whereby you need to be a public officer. And also there are the traineeship opportunities, which perhaps we'll discuss later on. And we also try to collaborate with various stakeholders in Malta. Nowadays, we are collaborating very closely with SEM. And our role is also to give information on the different career opportunities. So basically, as Faith said, there are various options ranging from contract agents to temporary agents, and these are governed by different decisions. And these decisions nowadays, you can even find them online. So my advice also, when you start preparing yourselves, ensure that you read the staff regulations, because certain conditions are included there. And you also start to familiarize yourself with the different opportunities and also the conditions. When it comes to contract agents, for instance, if there are internal competitions which are offered from time to time, especially when, for instance, the new college will start to be forming, there will be the internal competitions that are offered are the highest. So you can have the opportunity there in order to apply. And also you can move from one category to the other. So let's say you start as a contract agent and you decide, for instance, to apply for a temporary position. You have to consider that when it comes to contract agents, the salaries are much lower in comparison to temporary agents. And when it comes to temporary agents, the salaries are similar to the ones of permanent officials. The only difference is the duration. So basically, when it comes to Maltese, we have Maltese who started as permanent officials, but we have others who started as trainees and they worked their way up. So they started as trainees and then they applied for contract agent and then they applied for temporary agent and they worked their way up. So there are various options. Also, for instance, in July, we'll have a session on permanent officials, and we'll have more information there from the EPSO side on the different categories. However, I would like to flag that there is what we call the certification process. And this is something that you are able to find even in the staff regulations. And basically, it means that when you apply, for instance, for an AST position, an assistant, you are able to, after a number of years, take training and you become an AD. And this is something that perhaps many people are not aware of, and they apply directly for AD positions. They apply for EPSO competitions, perhaps without training as much as it is desired. They fail and they are discouraged to apply for other positions. So there are various options where you can start from. You can start as a public officer and become a seconded national expert or a national expert in professional training. You can start as a trainee and then, for instance, you apply for a contract agent or a temporary agent and then apply for an internal competition, or you may also opt to apply for an AST or ASTSC, which is the secretary or clerk, and then by time, after a number of years, you may apply for the certification. So basically, there are a number of options. And going back also to what Faith was saying with regards to the agencies, when it comes to the agencies, do not just consider the EPSO website, but also the EU agencies network, as Faith showed you. The difference between the two websites is that when it comes to EPSO, they can only upload vacancy notices if they are provided in the 24 official languages. So that means also Maltese. When it comes to the EU agencies network, they can also publish the vacancy notices even in one language. So if you are interested in the EU decentralized agencies, you have to consider as well the EU agencies network, because when it comes to the EPSO website, it may not be as comprehensive as the EU agencies network. And you can also scroll on the different agencies. Perhaps you are not that familiar with all of them, and you can see them on the left-hand side. And then if you want to access their website, you can easily click on it and you can get the information from there. So do not just focus on one category of vacancies. There are various opportunities. And if you do not make it on the first round, it doesn't mean that you are not good enough. It could mean that perhaps you need to dedicate more time in order to train, to study, etc. And also what we see from our end, when Maltese apply for contract agents, usually they are selected and they are recruited. So do not just focus on permanent officials. We had many cases whereby there were Maltese who were focusing just on the 85 competition, which was the generalist competition published each year. But over the past 2 years, this competition was not available. And EPSO are focusing more on specialist profiles. And we do not have any visibility when the generalist competition will be published. So focus more on the other contracts, such as contract agents, temporary agents, and also there are the traineeship opportunities. So there are many, many different opportunities, and you can work from one position to the other. All you need is to dedicate some time even to read the staff regulations, because there you are able to see information on career progression, on the different conditions, on the pension. Sometimes you receive queries even on taxation and national contribution, and the staff regulations includes everything. Just for you to know, the staff regulations was in vigor on 1st January 2014, but each and every year we discuss the salaries and the updates and the working party, and then there is an update each year in order to take into consideration the increases. So that part concerning salaries is updated on a yearly basis. The other conditions, we discuss reports, etc. But unless the sub-regulation is reopened, obviously certain provisions are standing. And when it comes to different type of contracts, it is important as well to consult the decisions that are available online, both for the temporary agents and for the contract agents, but we may include a link in order to give you more information. From our side, as a permanent representation, we try and organize sessions as well at the Perm Rep. We hold, for instance, 2 sessions for traineeships, whereby we contact each and every institution in order to send out a message that we would like to hold an event, because for data protection purposes, we cannot receive directly the names. And we try to give information on e-careers and the different opportunities. And we also give information, for instance, to those who are interested to work with government and perhaps would like to work on something in relation to EU affairs, and also give information on those positions that are directly related with government. So that means seconded national experts and national experts in professional training. We also try to give our support, for instance, when agencies in Malta or the ministry is organizing events in order to try and give information. And we are currently working on a frequently asked questions together with SEM in order to gather information not just on the external recruitment, we call it. So that means permanent officials, temporary agents, contract agents, and traineeships, but also information on how to apply, for instance, for seconded national experts or the national experts in professional training. So we try as much as possible to give this information. Obviously, it is always a work in progress. So any queries that you may have, even for instance, when you are applying for a certain application, you are seeing that perhaps there are certain stumbling blocks, feel free to contact Sam. They are gathering this kind of information. And then if no information is available, they can easily consult us as a permanent representation or even EPSO in order to try and give you information. So please reach out. And also if you know other Maltese who are interested in new career opportunities, inform them that they can easily contact Sam, and we try as much as possible to offer our support. And if you need any other information, feel free to send us an email, and we are more than happy to try and give you more information. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Charlene. So now we can pass on to a brief Q&A session. We just have 5 minutes and then we have the speakers on. If you have any questions, please either raise your hands or send them in the chat box, please. Even if something was unclear, please feel free to ask and we'll go through it again. Yes, Daya? Do you have a question, Daya, or was it by mistake? Okay, I think it was.
Okay, we have a question in the chat box. When you leave Malta for a new opportunity, you are eligible to a percentage of your salary as a relocation bonus. If you have lived in Brussels for a number of years before you apply for a new career, you will no longer be eligible for this bonus. Do you know exactly the amount of years this is? Maybe Charlene?
Yes.
I can take this. So basically, it always depends on the type of ID card that you have and also what you worked on. So let's say you were working at the permanent representation of Malta, or you were working as a seconded national expert or a national expert in professional training. Basically, you are paying the taxation and national insurance contribution in Malta. So that does not count. But if you have lived, for instance, for 5 years in Brussels, and you were, for instance, recruited with a private company, and you have the Belgian ID card, yes, that will have a bearing on what we call the expatriation allowance. So it always depends on the type of contract that you work with. However, if you have these kind of queries, feel free when you are recruited to send them to Sam, and we will be able to see the case. And if we do not have that kind of information, we can easily check even with the respective institutions, but try to do it before you actually leave Malta so that we ensure that the correct information is passed on to us. Thanks.
Okay,
I have two questions. Hello.
Hi, Daya. Yes, share.
Can I?
Yes, go ahead.
All right, okay. I'm trying to catch two birds with one stone by asking the following questions. With regards to the different figures in terms of salaries, whatever, does that include the tax deductions and the NI? And my second question is, when it comes to accommodation, you have to search for your own accommodation, or you will be given a full kind of assistance as regards where to go, the best prices, the best tariffs. How does the process goes on with regards to especially accommodation? Thank you.
Okay, yes, Charlene can take it. Yes.
So basically, when it comes to accommodation, everyone can try to see around, but there are specialized companies that you can easily find information on. However, when it comes to the EU institutions, nowadays, internally on their intranet, they include also information on accommodation and also other issues. So basically, you can try, for instance, to come to Brussels, live temporarily in a studio flat, and then you can try to see later on in order to also start understanding better in which area you would like to live. For instance, when it comes to parents, sometimes they prefer to relocate in Oakland because in Oakland there is a school whereby Maltese is taught, and they prefer to have an accommodation next to the school. So I would recommend that if you are not familiar with Brussels, do not try to find a permanent accommodation first, because there are various options. Sometimes you may have an agent that accepts accommodation for 1 year. Like in my case, I started with 1 year. Then the area that I was living, I was seeing that it was quite far from work. It was not easily connected, and I preferred to change. And then obviously I took some factors into consideration before finding my new apartment, and I've been living in my apartment now for nearly 5 years. So I wouldn't recommend to go for a permanent accommodation at the beginning. Also, when it comes to the EU institutions, they have a welcome desk. And these kind of queries are queries that they can give you information on. When it comes to the national insurance contribution and the taxation, the rates that FATE provided, those are gross, not net. But then you have to consider that there are a number of allowances. Now, I don't know if you were with us for the previous session. I had informed participants that the Commission has recently published the Human Resource Strategy. And they are trying to have a welcome pack. And we were also informed that this welcome pack, as soon as it is published, it may be available as well on the EPSO website. And that was something that we had suggested as well, because we have informed the Commission that when it comes to people who need to actually travel from Malta, they need the information before and not when they are recruited. So this is something that I believe in a few months' time, it will be published and will be available on the EPSO website. And in view that this welcome pack from the Commission side is still being drafted, if there are any queries that you have in mind that perhaps you would like to have more information, feel free to send it to Sam, and you can easily discuss even with the Commission in order to try and ensure that this information is included in the welcome pack. So feel free to put forward suggestions.
Okay, so now we have to stop taking questions. I'm very sorry, we can take them again later, and we need to pass on to our speakers. If you have more questions, please put them in the chat box. We'll answer as we go along, okay? So Michaela, it's in your hands now.
Yes, I will also stop the recording now.
Yes, please.